On today's podcast, we have Cris Matheson. Cris is a graduate of both the Monroe Institute and the College of Inner Knowledge, and a current member of the Out of Body Experience Research Centre. He's also an author of 2 novels, JC and Me at 33 and Beck's Drugs and Rock and Roll. He hosts workshops at the Allentown Holistic Health Centre, assisting people to enter the new world, a world that Cris has been navigating for over 30 years, thanks to lucid dreaming, meditation, and astral travel. Hi, Cris. How are you today?
Hi, Sharon. I'm good. I'm surviving.
That's
quarantine.
good.
Yourself?
I'm at home. Fortunately, I already know how to Skype and podcast, so COVID hasn't affected me at all. Yet you're the same, did you say?
I was just saying I'm a homebody, so sadly I haven't noticed much different.
No, and it's strange, isn't it? A lot of people who kind of are in our world are the same. We usually keep to ourselves, or we have certain groups that we go to, and everybody's pretty much on the same wavelength. So, no, really, and there's a lot of people who have just continued working too, of course, the essential workers, so they haven't felt anything either, except my husband in particular says the traffic's been amazing. And he's really enjoyed being able to get from our home, which normally takes about an hour and 15, to the city in like 15 minutes, which is...
Well, getting spoiled. It'll be a shock when it goes back to normal, I suppose.
Yeah, he's not looking forward to that. And of course, it's starting to ramp up now, back to what it is. So so today we're going to be discussing Cris' foray into an audiovisual album world. What inspired you to delve into this world, Cris? It's something that not a lot of people really get into, and it is kind of a new concept, but certainly for a lot of our listeners. So tell us about it.
Well, I had just finished up a project, and the person that was my partner in the project was Aaron Walker, and he comes from a really good band, and he just finished up with them, and he'd been doing them for about 10 years as well. So we were looking for something else to do. So we thought we wanted to do something that was minimal, simple, but heavy on atmosphere, and I could blend in some of the kind of stark sounds of the 1980s post-punk scene, but I also wanted to put in a lot of spirituality, make it a bit of a mind trip, because he's an artist as well. So I wanted something to reflect some of those larger mind states that I've experienced over the last 35 years through consciousness expansion and meditation. So I think you've had a look at had a chance to have a look at the...
I did, and I made the mistake, listeners, of watching it just before bedtime. I naturally assumed that it was going to be something that would lull me into sleep, but it wasn't. It really is more of an entertaining kind of a push to maybe... to be honest, I really don't know how to describe the experience. I was transfixed, but it wasn't at times an uncomfortable experience what I was seeing, but then it was also comfortable. So
well, that's good, because it's not like Kenny G on Prozac. I didn't want to have the training wheels of like meditational music, which is quite, chamomile tea and get into that kind of thing. But this is, if you actually get into consciousness exploration, you actually have to do a lot of self-work, and you go through these kind of internal mindscapes, and some of them are confronting. They are vast. And I think the word holy means awe as well. So it doesn't just mean it's nice. When people meet these like holy angels or have special experiences, often they're terrified. So there is an aspect in it where you have to do some deep work on yourself. And the more you do that, the easier it is to navigate those realms. So I'm not surprised it's a little bit daunting, because, when you step into a vast experience, it's outside your ego. So there's a surrender to that, and you have to learn how to trust it. You have to learn how to navigate it. And there's a lot to it. And the more skills you have in that regard, the easier it gets. If you have a support network in a group, or the Buddhists would call it like a community to support you, then that helps. If you've got teachings to refer to, that helps as well. But it's not just a simply sitting down on the cushion and just like vaguing out a little bit. True meditation, if you start to go into the depths of your subconscious, can be very confronting. It's certainly much larger than what you think you are.
So have you just done the one? Are there plans for more down the track, or?
We may. I recorded it when we were together. I was very fortunate that he owned a recording studio and we were living together at the time. So that's another reason we did it. We said, well, let's do a project together. And so that was nice. But now I'm living in Rockhampton. So we're separated by the tyranny of distance. We're about 1,000 kilometres away. So it's very hard for us to make one. Although I'm always sending him ideas. We could easily do another one. And I think the next one would be better as well because we've got, we'd have certain different directions that we'd explore. I
Yeah.
also want to put in binaural beats into it too, but I don't think we'll do that. But that would have been another option as well.
Mm. Oh, there wasn't. That's funny because I actually thought there was some in there in the background.
That's right. I played it to a few of my friends and they said, whoa. I said, how did it feel? They said, oh, it felt like I was taken out somewhere. Did you put binaural beats in it? Because they knew I was into that. I said, no, but I was trying to replicate that sound. Like consciousness has lots of different applications. And I learned some of that from the Monroe Institute, which you referred to before. And you can actually dial up certain different states. You can go into healing states, creative states, meet beings, go into weird archetypal states, go into like DMT realms. You can do all those kind of things once you know how. And some of those states are confronting. So, they're all pretty large. So I want to replicate some of that into the music. I think it sounds like from what you're saying that they had that effect on you, which is good.
Yes,
That's what I wanted. Especially, it goes naturally too with the audio visual album, which is on YouTube, counterclockwise falling echoes, because it's that kind of largeness, that kind of psychedelic large space. You see that when you walk into a mosque. It's got a kind of an alien aspect to it, but it's also very vast. Like the people of the desert, when they go into a mosque, it's almost like an internal vastness too, isn't it? They kind of transfer from the desert into the temple.
Exactly.
And it's got a bit of that aspect. And some of the alternative videos we did for the songs, one of them's like in a mosque kind of thing. So it's got that kind of aspect to it. That was quite deliberate.
What I'll do is I'll attach a link for our listeners so that they can go and check it out on YouTube to the actual podcast here and inside the next upcoming magazine issue too. So we know now how your collaboration has come about with your friend. What is his name again?
His name's Aaron Walker. He's a good artist and he does the recording here under Batcave Studios, which has since closed down, but he was doing a lot of artists there and he was doing the production and he was the singer and the lyricist. So it was good. We got together working on another friend's project, which apparently I was told may have been the world's first music video for a book launch, Stone and Sky, which is like a steampunk novel. So we did that. I got out the 6-foot harp and we did a totally different style of music for that. But we met on that and that was like the seed of our friendship because it was so much fun to be working together.
No, it sounds like a great collaboration and hopefully more going. So your band name is Falling Echoes. Where does that come from?
Well, we like that because echo is like a Greek goddess. So we like the idea of like getting these echoes from another place. If you ever go out to a place and do the cooey, you get that echo back. It's kind of haunting because it's like it's got a life of its own. So there's a bit of that aspect in it because the music's a little bit gothic too. And again, it suggests that sense of space. But also falling echoes, it kind of refers to maybe the slight tragedy that our society has lost that ability to tap into that other level. So we've got remnants of it like in our churches and different institutions, but it's kind of dying, it's falling off. So this is trying to reinvigorate that a little bit, hopefully. And I think we're going through a spiritual revolution now anyway, especially with the internet and the spread of information. So this is just adding a little bit of a domino effect into what's already happening. Would you agree? It's certainly you'd
definitely.
be.
I mean, I've always believed that there's something greater like controlling us. So, Cris, tell us about the instruments and the software tools you use to put the audio-visual album together.
Well, it was a bit like putting together duct tape in some ways. We used some of the old kind of equipment, but it's amazing what you can do if you've got good ideas. I know the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper's on 3 or 4 tracks. So. And people haven't really beaten them, even though they've got like 100 channels. But we did have some nice stuff too. We had a Steinberg program, which is a music software program from about 2004. And we had a Yamaha QY10 sequencer for the drums and a Roland EP. I think that's named after you, Sharon. Roland EP 7 keyboard and a Roland MT120 digital sequencer and sound module. But the thing is, I think I had an old Squire Stratocaster. I played through a 25-watt Fender amp and a Hoffman bass. I played through the PV amp because I did all the instruments. Also, I think the cheapest thing we had though was a Casio CTK700 keyboard, which we bought for $100 from the
Yeah.
shop. So it's amazing what you can get. I mean, I got that idea because I was watching Midnight Oil live once, and he had a $5,000 keyboard, but he also had like a $50 Casio keyboard on the top of it. And he was actually doing solos on that in the middle of short memory. And I thought, wow. So if you've got imagination, you can get away with stuff. So it was a mix of those things. Also, my beloved blue Ashton acoustic guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So we put all that together, and I think it worked pretty well. It's got an interesting sound, I think. And sometimes I see like Lenny Kravitz, he gets a certain sound by going back and deliberately using tube amps and valve amps and using an analog sound instead of a digital sound. So we mixed a bit of that in too. It gives it a bit of a rawer sound. It's not quite so synthesized, and it sounds a little bit different to what's on the radio at the moment. So I think that captures people's attention of what is.
It does. And I know exactly how that a Stratocaster sounds because I bought one for my daughter. It was quite funny. I was at this. I don't usually do Melbourne Cup because I'm anti horse racing. But one year, the school, I had to do my mother's duty. So I got sucked into organising the silent auction thing for the school for that day. And so me being a little odd, I went to a variety of different stores and asked them all if they would contribute an item. And one of them was a music store at Indooroopilly. And he supplied this amazing blue Stratocaster guitar, which was, I think it was worth like $1,500. And I was like, wow, this is just amazing. So, and the type of auction I'd organize is people just could put bids on them, you know. So, anyway, so at the very end, I went round and no one had bid on this particular item, and I thought, oh, that's a shame. And I had a teenage daughter at the time who was learning the guitar, and she wanted to be a bit cooler. So I thought, oh, look, and at the time I didn't know how much it was worth. I didn't understand the worth of things. So I just thought, oh, it's a guitar, so I'll just throw $150 on that. So I put it on, and no one else, of course, was interested. And I got this guitar, and I brought it home and showed my daughter, and she was like, "Oh my God, you've got me this amazing guitar!" It was just, I was absolutely. I think when I bought the the amp to go with it, the amp was actually more than the guitar what I paid for the guitar. So tell us about your upcoming book that you're currently working on, Singularity, Hilarity, and particularly the first chapter.
Okay. Well, as you know, I've done two already, and I've got a kind of a comedy and a spiritual bent. I like mixing those two things together.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is more of a straightforward novel and a comedy of errors, I suppose. And the first chapter is Womb with a View. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah. And so a little bit of, so not as irreverent as Jesus and Me at 33, but funnier.
No, that was, I deliberately wrote JC and Me at 33. That was part kind of like comedy, but half of it was very deliberately written as a spiritual quest kind of. So, and not, some of those are quite boring or very serious. So I want to mix in like 35 years of spiritual experience for that one with a bit of a reverence. But my first book before that was Beck's Drugs, Rock and Roll, and that was totally irrelevant. There wasn't really a spiritual thing in there. So this third one will be a bit more like that, but as a novel.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. Please send me a copy when you have one, or or your link to wherever you're going to post it. So are you still lucid dreaming and astral traveling after all these years? And has anything have you had any epiphanies on the whole concept, or do you have a process, or is it something that you can share with everybody?
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, I've done it for 35 years, so I've done lots of different approaches in that time. You know, I've used hemisync, binaural beats, and I was in a meditational college for 7 years, and I studied Kabbalah extensively. So a lot of different things, and then I got into like Taoist energy exercises, like the microcosmic orbit, and then astral traveling, and then I discovered phasing, which is kind of like lucid dreaming. But once you've learned to astral travel, you realize a lot of these things are on a continuum, and astral traveling is quite hard to get into. It takes a lot of energy work, whereas lucid dreaming and phasing, it's a lot easier to get into once you know how to do it. And there's a free book by Michael Raduga called The Phase, which is fantastic. If you follow that, you'll be able to get into it. It's not hard. So that's, I've been doing that, and that's been evolving over 35 years. I think you get to the point where you kind of come full circle. You're not needing to try and do certain things to try, and you don't need the training wheel so much. You kind of go a bit multidimensional, and it's quite easy. Like people talk about the DMT trip. That's just one example. I can kind of do those things just naturally because it's just a natural part of you. What a DMT trip does is it forces you chemically into a space that I think we already exist in, but by being brought up in a culture and having our mind trained in a certain way, we have a lot of filters, so we naturally shut it off. And that's probably not a bad thing. Otherwise, you might get much done. But as you get to a certain age, and as your meditation practice matures, you can get into those states fairly easily. And it's all the same. Although I was I went to that state last night, and it wasn't, I was looking at it, and one of the beings came up to me. I said, "Oh, I'm here." And they said, "Yeah, you're late," because I've got a sense of humour. And then I said to them, "Well, I can't quite see you too well." And they said, "Yeah, you're in the cheap seats." So they came and grabbed me and they caught me, and suddenly, oh, bang, there's, and they become, there's a real being there, But they're not quite human. They're consciousness, but they kind of telepath with you, and you go through different mind states. And it's good if you have a Buddhist background because you know that they're real, but they're also only relatively real. Because I think some of those consciousnesses come from a taxonomy, which is far beyond our understanding, but they will use certain metaphors and content from your mind and your subconscious to pull you slowly out. I suppose it's a bit like the way I play with my cat. I think those beings are way smarter, and also tapped into like what appears to be a matrix of other beings. So it's a bit like a cosmic chat room.
Well, I wasn't quite prepared for my first kind of trip out. That was a bit of a shock to me. I wasn't even trying to do it. It just kind of happened one night. And I think people don't realize what an actual tactile experience it is, what a 3D experience it is for a person to actually, when they go out there. I didn't. I literally thought that I would just be, basically floating around and like looking, and that was about it, maybe hearing. But I was completely blown away by the touching.
Yeah.
It was actually quite a different type of experience, not the experience I was expecting. And a lot of people talk about how they meet a monster or something. I didn't. I just went straight into this other zone, which
Well, you can. It's a thought responsive environment. So that's why it's good to know how to meditate, because you can manifest your fears, and you can also, if you have like a negative energy or something in your subconscious that needs to be processed, you can see that. So it's a bit like therapy and interact with it. But if you know how to navigate it, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
No, you're right though. I mean, I have talked to lots of people, and like I know people who've done Vipassana, and I'll say, "What do you get from that?" And they go, "Oh, I just kind of feel a bit peaceful." And they sit on a mat. It's a bit like the Hunger Games. They've got to sit there for a day and try and stop their thoughts. But when I teach people like that who think, "Oh, I've been meditating for years," I teach them like how to phase or to get into these other spaces. They're totally blown away because it's actually a different place. But consciousness is interesting. You can just go into like a Zen state, or you can go back to the white light and become like that witness consciousness where you dissolve and you no longer exist. That's another state. But there's lots of different levels and experiences to be had between your normal waking three-dimensional ego consciousness and the pure light white experience. And they're very valid and very real. And there's like a hierarchy of them too. There's different places you can go to. But it's very, very tactile. You're no longer here when you go to those other places. So I'm interested in what you did to get into it. Were you meditating?
Gosh, I just interviewed a gentleman who does this professionally in Paddington, and I've forgotten his name. It was a few years back now, and I'd done a 3 Monday nights in a row through that series, and I think this was probably the following Monday night. I hadn't actually gone to a session, But I suppose I was in that area. I'd done a lot of research into what it was all about. So I didn't know anything about astral travel at that point or lucid dreaming. So I'd done a lot of research over the previous month, and I'd interviewed him on 2 occasions. And then I think he'd said exactly what you said is you don't need any tools, Sharon. You just need to lay in bed and, you know, visualize where you want to go or what you want to do. And so basically I thought, okay, I'll give this a go. So basically I just lay in bed and then boom, it was like amazing. So I don't know if it was because I'd had the week, the 2 or 3 weeks of meditation prior, and then the research, or my mind was just a bit more open to it at that point. But yes, I just wasn't expecting it to be like I was actually there and embodied, and
That's
that
quite,
was,
yeah. Once you give yourself permission to, and you've got some basic techniques, and you've got the right techniques, it's not that hard to get into. You can get there after trying a few times, you know, within a week. You don't have to try for years and years. And as you say, once you get there, it's like flicking a switch. You're kind of here, and you can meditate, and you can always just kind of feel like you're here and getting more peaceful and expanded. Or you can actually go to these different places, and literally you flick a switch, and then you are there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to explain to somebody who hasn't experienced it.
It's impossible, except to say that it's real. But unless you've, as I say, unless you've tasted chocolate, I mean, you can talk about it and write philosophy on it, you know, and talk about it all day. But once you've tasted it, you know what it's like, and it's kind of natural and simple. And if someone else has tasted it, you just go, oh, it was like that, wasn't it? And they go, oh, yeah, it was. You don't really need to say anything. But it's very hard to explain.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't for a while after it. I didn't actually share it with anyone
Mm-hmm.
because I thought
Well,
it
that's
was a
because
personal experience too. But I think I was with friends
I
one
think
night.
society's changing too. I think. When did this happen for you?
Oh, probably. I think I interviewed him about 2 years ago. Two years, yeah,
Okay.
about 2 years ago. Mm.
Well, maybe if it happened to you like 20 years ago, it was a bit underground, and there wasn't much information about it, so people wouldn't come out. You wouldn't share those things. But I think things are changing now. There's a spiritual, you know, spread of information going out through the internet. So it's not so weird now. It's easy to find people who've had the experience, a lot easier than it was in the past, you know. And I think it's good for it to be shared because we're social creatures, and unless you validate it with someone else, then it can remain a bit dreamlike. You need to kind of have it confirmed. But you can also go a step further. I've worked with groups and objectively proved these states, you know, actually got information on different things and proven it, you know, things that we couldn't know, like the lotto numbers and stuff, and won the lotto out of it. So you can do that. So it is definite state, and you can prove that it's got an independent existence as well.
Yeah, mine had a more of a sexual overtone. So it was one of
Yeah.
those, yeah, I know
Well,
that you couldn't really, it
you can't
wasn't
even
for
share it.
like
But
conversation.
that's the funny thing is that
So,
God is sexy. Why do you think all those gurus get into trouble?
oh, all right. There's something out there. So I basically felt like I hadn't been kissed so much in my life. It was ridiculous and really good kissing. Yeah.
I think that's why one of my missions is that's why I don't mind talking about spirituality, even though, like as you say, it can be kind of personal. Is that I think the more the mindset changes at a grassroots level, the more our institutions will naturally change. Instead of us trying to think, oh, we've got to fix the problem from the ground, and you know, politicians, we've done that. You know, we've done the democratic experiment and all the political experiments of the 20th century. But I think what we haven't done is, I think, as a society, connect up and have most people having an understanding that they're connected to the universe. Once they have that, then it'll be fine. It'd be good if we could get all our politicians, give them DMT too, because I think after one trip, they would start making different laws because they'd be more empathic. They'd realise that everybody's connected. So they wouldn't be driven by money so much. They'd have a lot more of a welfare focus and all that kind.
That would be nice, but I can't see that
I think
happening.
that's coming. I don't think that's pie in the sky. I think we are going through a spiritual revolution, and I think it's a natural extension of the 60s. 60s, the seeds were laid,